The sun began setting over the mountains of Arizona, bathing the sky in warm orange and purple hues. Jack Reynolds, a 37-year-old veteran, slowly walked toward the city animal shelter. His worn boots clicked on the sidewalk, each step reminding him of the weight of recent years. Since leaving the army 2 years ago, he had tried unsuccessfully to fill the void that had opened in his life. Neither work nor therapy had been able to close this gap. Rex, his loyal German shepherd, had accompanied him on countless dangerous missions. But after an injury, Rex had been retired. Jack had tried to cope without his four-legged companion, but it wasn't the same. The shelter he now stood before was small and unremarkable. Its rusty fences and makeshift dog kennels emanating the smell of disinfectants mixed with occasional barking from within. Jack was here at the insistence of his older sister Emily, who firmly believed that a dog could help him cope with the aftermath of his service time. Hesitantly, he entered the shelter. Deep inside, he sensed that this visit was an important step, even if he didn't know why. He walked through the narrow corridors, casting appraising glances at the dogs in their cages. Some barked and wagged their tails enthusiastically to gain his attention. Others watched him silently, their eyes filled with quiet melancholy. Yet none of them seemed to have that special spark he had once shared with Rex. Just as he was about to give up, a young shelter worker approached him. "Mr. Reynolds, we have a German shepherd in the back who might interest you. He came here a few weeks ago, but he's something special." Jack looked at her in surprise and finally nodded silently. Following her to a secluded area of the shelter, in one of the kennels all the way in the corner lay a large dog with black-brown fur. His posture was tense, but his eyes were tired. Jack's heart began beating faster. He would have recognized this dog anywhere. "Rex," he whispered, his voice barely audible. The German shepherd lazily lifted his head and looked at him, but there was no visible reaction, no wagging tail, no rising to greet him, just an empty stare as if Jack were a stranger. "He doesn't recognize me," Jack mumbled as he took a step back, pain shooting through him as he spoke these words. But something held him back from giving up on this reunion dream. It was Rex, he was sure of it. The dog who had once saved his life was now just a shadow of his former self. The scars on Rex's hind leg and one of his ears told of the battles they had weathered together, but his eyes, once full of life and energy, were dark and distant. Jack recognized the invisible wounds because he carried the same burdens. "He's been through a lot," the shelter worker explained quietly. "He was found in another state in a smaller shelter. It seems someone abandoned him who couldn't handle him. He suffers from anxiety and doesn't trust people easily anymore." She paused and studied Jack before asking, "Do you know him?" Jack nodded slowly, his voice barely more than a whisper as he said, "Yes, he was once my partner, my best friend." For a moment, his thoughts lost themselves in memories. The rigorous training where they learned to trust each other blindly, the dangerous missions where Rex had saved his life more than once, and the lonely nights when the dog had kept him from falling apart. And now, after all these years, Rex didn't recognize him anymore. The shelter worker carefully opened the cage. Rex watched her but made no move to get up. Jack knelt down slowly and stretched out his hand. "Hey buddy, I'm Jack," he said softly, his voice trembling, but he kept it steady. Rex tilted his head slightly as if trying to understand but remained tense. The shelter worker broke the silence. "Would you like to spend some time with him? We can take him to the yard." Jack nodded immediately. In the play yard, Rex continued to keep his distance. He sniffed the air but avoided any direct contact. Jack watched him patiently, trying to decipher the dog's thoughts. With the setting sun, Jack made himself a promise. "I won't give up until I bring him back." His voice was calm, but his determination was unmistakable. When they finally left, Rex lay in the bed of Jack's truck, wrapped in a blanket Jack had brought, specially for him. The dog kept his gaze fixed out the window, avoiding any eye contact. Jack kept glancing in the rearview mirror. He knew that the path to regaining Rex's trust wouldn't be easy, but he was ready to walk it. Both carried burdens that made them similar to each other. When they arrived home, Jack parked in front of his modest house. The small property was surrounded by a generous garden where a few trees rustled in the wind. It was quiet, but Jack knew this was the first step on a long journey for Rex and for him. Jack opened the truck door and called Rex, but the dog hesitated. After a few seconds, he slowly climbed down and took careful steps, each movement deliberate as if constantly assessing his surroundings. Jack led Rex to the front door and carefully opened it. "Welcome to your new home, boy," he said, trying to sound cheerful despite the hint of uncertainty in his voice. Each moment seemed unpredictable, and Jack prepared himself internally for the unexpected. Determined to create a comfortable environment, Jack had prepared an area in the corner of the living room. There lay a new dog bed, food and water, bowls, and some toys he'd bought on the way home. "This is your place, Rex," he said, pointing to the corner. But the German Shepherd remained motionless, ignoring the invitation and just standing there. Jack sighed, feeling a wave of frustration wash over him. While preparing something to eat in the kitchen, his thoughts drifted. He remembered the days when Rex had run to him full of energy, loyal, alive, a faithful companion. Now, however, this dog seemed to be another being, in a way that Jack understood all too well. He glanced at Rex, who still stood in the same spot, staring into the distance. "I know how you feel, buddy. I feel just as lost," Jack mumbled, more to himself than to the dog. That night, Jack left the bedroom door open, hoping Rex would feel safe enough to come closer. When he turned off the light, he heard soft steps on the floor. Rex didn't come to him though. Instead, laying down near the bedroom door, still maintaining his distance. In the darkness, Jack had to smile. It was a small step, but for him it meant the beginning of something bigger. The next morning, Jack woke to quiet footsteps in the hallway. Rex sat near the door, watching him attentively with perked ears. The dog remained there for a while, silent and motionless. For a moment, Jack felt a spark of hope. Maybe Rex did remember him. "Good morning," Jack said, stretching and forcing himself to smile. But the German Shepherd just looked away and slowly trotted back to his corner of the room. Determined to rebuild their connection, Jack spent most of the day trying to interact with Rex. He grabbed a tennis ball and threw it to him, but Rex didn't react. He placed a bowl of fresh food beside himself, but Rex wouldn't approach until Jack left the room. Every attempt to establish closeness was met with cool distance. Jack felt the pain of rejection, but he knew it was more than just fear. It was distrust, perhaps even deep pain. That afternoon, Jack decided to try something new. He retrieved an old, worn military vest from the closet, the same one he had worn during their deployments. The familiar scent of sand, sweat, and battlefield surrounded the vest, and Jack held it in his hands for a moment. "Let's see if you remember this, buddy," he said quietly, and carried the vest to the backyard where Rex lay. Rex raised his head and looked at the vest curiously, his head tilting slightly as if something stirred within him. Jack felt a spark of hope flare up. He placed the vest on the ground and took a step back to give Rex space to approach it. But instead, the dog backed away, his tail lowering. As he retreated to a corner, Jack sighed deeply. The hope that had flickered for a moment extinguished again. That night, he sat on the porch watching Rex, who lay in the backyard, staring silently at the star-filled sky as if lost in thought. "I'm not giving up on you, Rex," Jack said loudly, his voice firm and filled with a mixture of determination and melancholy. It was as if he were speaking to the wind. "You didn't give up on me when I needed you most, and I won't give up on you now." He knew he was asking a lot, but he also knew that the bond between them was still there, even if buried under layers of trauma. The air grew colder, and Jack decided to give Rex the space he needed. He went inside, leaving the back door open, and hours later went to sleep. The sound of claws quietly scraping across the floor woke him. When he looked down at the foot of his bed, he saw Rex lying there, eyes half closed. Jack said nothing, just smiled in the darkness. The distance between them was melting. It was small progress, but enough to rekindle Jack's determination for the days ahead. Small moments began to appear like cracks in the wall of distrust separating Jack and Rex. On Monday morning, while Jack was chopping wood in the garden, he noticed Rex watching him from afar. The German shepherd kept his tail lowered, but in his eyes lay a subtle curiosity. Jack paused a moment, wiped the sweat from his brow, and playfully stretched out his hand. "Come here, boy," he said in a gentle tone. Rex didn't come closer, but he didn't look away either. Later that day, during a walk through the yard, Jack picked up a stick and tossed it forward, without great expectations. To his surprise, Rex took a few hesitant steps toward the object, stopped, then returned to his spot. Jack smiled. "You remember how to play, don't you? You're just pretending you don't." Despite Rex's shy reaction, this moment felt like progress. On Tuesday, Jack decided to take Rex for a walk. He took out Rex's old identification tag, cleaned it, and attached it to a new collar. "Let's go for a walk," Jack said and put the leash on. Rex hesitated when Jack opened the garden gate, looking outside as if the world beyond. The fence was hostile. With a gentle tug on the leash, however, Jack managed to get him to come along. During the walk, Rex seemed tense and vigilant, constantly sniffing the air and keeping his body stiff as if expecting danger at any moment. Jack noticed this and spoke calmly. "You don't have to be like this, boy. We're safe here." He knew these words meant little to Rex, but he hoped the gentle tone would make a difference. Over time, on the way home, something unexpected happened. As Jack removed Rex's leash, the dog approached and sniffed his hand. Jack froze, his heart pounding. "This is it," he mumbled quietly, trying not to show too much emotion. This small gesture felt like a sign that something in Rex was beginning to change. That evening, while Jack prepared dinner, Rex lay on the carpet near the kitchen. It wasn't an open invitation for affection, but the proximity was enough to show Jack they were on the right path. He glanced at Rex and whispered, "I think we're becoming friends again. What do you think?" Rex didn't answer, but his gaze seemed less distant, as if part of him recognized the man who had once meant everything to him. It was a gray morning, and fog lay like a veil over the yard. Jack woke up early, as he always did, and found Rex already awake. The dog sat beside the living room window, staring thoughtfully outside. Jack approached carefully, aware that every interaction with Rex was a test of patience. After breakfast, Jack retrieved something special from an old wooden box he had kept since his military days. Between medals, photos, and letters, he found a worn rubber ball. It was a toy that Rex had loved during breaks on the field. Jack held the ball for a moment, then went into the yard where Rex was and carefully rolled it on the ground. Rex looked at the ball, his body tensing. He sniffed the air as if the ball emitted a familiar scent buried deep in his memories. For a moment, it seemed he would ignore it, but then he hesitantly stepped forward, carefully sniffed the ball, and retreated again. Jack watched silently, noticing the dog's inner struggle. "You remember, don't you?" he asked, quietly. Something seemed to have changed that day. During lunch, Rex stayed closer to Jack and followed his every movement. For the first time, he took food directly from Jack's hand. Jack could hardly believe what he was seeing, but he kept his emotions in check. Rex ate slowly, while his gaze remained fixed on Jack, as if he was finally starting to trust him again. Later, Jack sat on the porch with the ball in his hand, turning it between his fingers. "Remember when you brought me this thing in the middle of the night because you couldn't sleep?" He chuckled softly, remembering how Rex had tried to cheer him up back then. Jack threw the ball gently across the yard, not expecting Rex to react. To his surprise, the dog's ears perked up and He followed the ball with his eyes, even though he didn't move. As Rex lay beside Jack's bed that night, Jack noticed how the distance between them was growing smaller piece by piece. The burden seemed to be lifting. Before turning off the light, Jack looked at Rex and said, "We've almost made it, partner. We're almost there." The sun shone brightly the next morning, bathing the backyard in warm light. Jack prepared for another day with Rex and decided to try something new. He recreated one of the old training routines they had practiced on the battlefield. With a whistle around his neck and a rope in hand, Jack hoped the exercise would trigger something in Rex's memory, something hidden beneath the trauma and time. "Let's take it slow, boy," Jack said and walked to the middle of the yard. Rex followed at a safe distance, his eyes focused on every movement. Jack whistled and gave a simple command, "Sit." For a moment, Rex remained still, but then he slowly lowered his body and sat down. "Good boy," Jack called out, with a mixture of surprise and enthusiasm in his voice. Jack hadn't seen that look in years. There was something there, a spark of recognition, as if the German Shepherd finally remembered who Jack was to him. The veteran felt his eyes getting wet, but he kept his composure. He didn't want to frighten Rex with his emotions. This moment marked a turning point. For the rest of the day, Rex followed Jack around the house, even allowing small gestures of affection. When Jack sat on the couch, Rex lay down beside him on the floor, something he had never done before. It wasn't just the training or the familiar objects. It seemed as if Rex was gradually lowering his defenses and letting Jack back into his life. That evening, while organizing his things, Jack found an old photo of himself and Rex in the field. It was taken on the day they had completed a difficult mission. Both looked exhausted, but there was a glimmer of pride in their eyes. Jack placed the photo on the nightstand and showed it to Rex. "Look at this, buddy. We were quite a team, weren't we?" Rex stared at it for a few seconds before settling down next to Jack, closer than he'd been since his return. The rumble of distant thunder broke through the gray as the sky began to rain over Jack's backyard. Jack observed Rex, who stood near the porch, his gaze fixed on the horizon, as if hypnotized by the dance of lightning and the drumming of rain. Jack approached slowly, with a coffee cup in hand. "You've always loved storms, haven't you?" he murmured, more to himself. Rex slowly turned his head and looked at Jack for the first time in weeks. It was a look full of hesitation, but also with a hint of curiosity, a small sign that something was changing in Rex. Jack went to the cabinet and took out the old military whistle he had kept along with other items from his service days. He knew it was a risk, but perhaps the familiar sound would trigger a response from Rex. He returned to the porch and whistled gently. Jack blew twice shortly on the whistle, the same pattern he had used during missions to call Rex to his side. The German Shepherd turned sharply, his ears standing at attention for a moment. Jack almost thought Rex would run to him, like before, but instead, the dog only took one hesitant step toward him before stopping. The sparkle in his eyes faded, replaced by a shadow of doubt. Rex lowered his head as if fighting something inside. "It's okay, partner," Jack said in a soothing voice. "We'll go at your pace." As the rain grew stronger, Jack prepared a dry blanket and a bowl of fresh water for Rex. He placed them in a corner of the room but decided not to push him. Instead, he sat on the floor, not too close but close enough to show Rex he wasn't alone. Gradually, the dog relaxed, lying down on the carpet and casting furtive glances at Jack. As night fell, Rex surprised Jack. He slowly approached him, his heavy breathing echoing in the silence of the room. He stopped just inches from Jack. The veteran remained, still respecting the dog's space and not daring to move. Rex sniffed the air around Jack as if gathering courage for something monumental. Finally, he hesitantly touched Jack's hand with his nose. The touch lasted only a moment, but it was enough to make Jack's heart beat faster. "You're coming back to me, buddy," he whispered, his voice full of emotion. He didn't try to pet Rex, not wanting to destroy the fragile moment. Jack remained, sitting quietly, letting Rex set the pace, and felt a wave of relief when the dog finally withdrew. That night, as the storm raged outside, Jack found Rex lying at the foot of his bed. The dog wasn't completely relaxed, but he seemed less distant than before. For Jack, that was all he needed, proof that despite all the pain and trauma, the bond between them still existed and was waiting to be rebuilt. The next morning, the sun rose brightly, casting a golden glow over the yard. Jack sat on the porch with a cup of coffee, watching Rex slowly walk across the wet grass. Something about his movements was different. They were less tense, and for brief moments, Rex didn't look like a traumatized dog, but like the partner Jack had known before. Determined to move forward, Jack took the old whistle in his hand again. It was a risky test, but he knew he had to try. Jack gave 2 short whistles, the same as the night before. This time, Rex lifted his head almost instantly. His ears perked up, and his whole body seemed to be on alert. Jack remained calm, without hurry or excessive expectations. "Come on, buddy," he murmured. To Jack's surprise, Rex made an encouraging sound, took a few steps toward him, and kept his gaze fixed on the whistle as if searching for something familiar. Jack slowly picked up the rubber ball, held it in front of Rex for a moment, and then gently threw it aside. The dog hesitated, but something about his posture seemed to change. With an unexpected burst of energy, Rex ran after the ball, brought it back, and dropped it at Jack's feet. The veteran stood still, his eyes filling with tears. This seemingly small yet significant action was proof that Rex was beginning to overcome his barriers. "That's you, partner. You're still in there," Jack said with a choked voice. He picked up the ball again and repeated the gesture. This time, Rex ran faster, his tail wagging slightly as he came back. The progress felt almost magical, as if weeks of patience had finally paid off. For Jack, every step Rex took was a victory over the traumas they had both endured. That night, for the first time since his arrival, Rex lay down next to Jack on the couch, his head resting beside Jack's leg. Jack didn't speak, didn't move. He let the silence speak for itself. It was a moment of reconnection, a slow rebuilding of trust. As Jack gently stroked Rex's head, he knew he would never give up on his friend who had once saved his life, no matter how long it would take. The morning began with birds chirping in the yard, but inside the house, something even more significant was happening. Rex stood in the middle of the room, his eyes fixed on Jack. Jack held a leash in one hand and an old military vest in the other. "Today's the big day, buddy," Jack said with a hopeful smile. He had decided to take Rex to a special place, a nearby park that had been their favorite spot on training-free days. It wasn't just a test, but also an opportunity to see how far they had come. On the way to the park, Rex seemed more relaxed than ever before, leaning his head slightly out of the open truck window, letting the wind brush across his face. Jack watched him through the rearview mirror and felt a mixture of pride and relief. For weeks, he had fought to bring back the dog who meant so much to him. Now this moment seemed to be a milestone. "Just like old times, huh?" Jack murmured without expecting an answer. When they arrived at the park, Jack unleashed Rex and reached for the rubber ball again. Rex stood still for a moment, analyzing his surroundings, but instead of hesitating like before, he ran immediately when Jack threw the ball. The two played for hours as if time and trauma had never existed. Jack increasingly felt that Rex was becoming the dog he once knew, but he also understood that they had both changed forever. They weren't the same as before, but that didn't mean they couldn't build something new. Late in the afternoon, as the sun was setting, Jack sat on one of the park benches. Rex lay down beside him, his head resting on Jack's leg. Jack looked into the distance, a deep feeling of peace flowing through him. "I told you I wouldn't give up on you, Rex," he whispered, and for the first time in years, gently stroked the dog's head. Jack felt as if a part of him had been restored. Rex wasn't just a dog. He was a symbol of all they had survived and overcome together. As they drove home that night, Jack knew that although the future was uncertain, it was something he could face with Rex by his side. Rex had found his way back into Jack's heart with his loyalty and courage. And Jack had learned that patience, love, and determination could heal even the deepest wounds. They were complete again and ready to face whatever lay ahead of them.